Okay, she's sitting alone and she's crying.
Okay, crying. The baby.
Hello. I did something to the mic. Never mind. Okay, who can cry? Can you explain what you did? This wasn't rehearsed. I don't know what they're doing. Can you explain what you did?
I helped him. I told him what's wrong and I helped him stand up.
Alright, thank you. Matthias, can you explain what you did?
I asked what was wrong.
Okay. So now let's imagine you're all grown up and you're working and you're sitting at your desk and your coworker right next to you, you're seeing he's struggling with something. His head's on the floor, his hands on his forehead, and he's looking down and he looks sad. What do you think you should do?
When somebody does not have food and somebody has, I give them the food.
Huh? You give him food?
His head was
Oh. So you give your coworker food. Any other answers?
Give them chocolate.
Okay, that makes everyone happy.
Help them work.
Exactly, that's what you do. You help them in work. You see, you guys were asked questions. That's what you're supposed to do. That's how you'll react when you face these situations. So what you did right here was, I think I did it again. What you did right here was be a witness for others. You helped another person even though no one told you. So you helped another person without being told to. You know what that's called?
Helping.
Huh?
Helping.
Okay, another word for it. I'm not going to use the mic anymore. Keep turning up. Yeah. Huh? Being tender, okay.
Being helpful.
Responsible. Being nice to others, okay. You gave proper answers. You gave proper answers to being a witness to others. Yeah.
Being lovable.
Yes, lovable, okay. Does any of that remind you of a Bible character that showed the same things you did? That's one. Another, a big important character in the Bible.
Jesus.
Amen. That's right. So in your life, you could be like Jesus. You have an option to not to help the person, or you have also the choice to ignore them. But you guys went ahead and helped them. See, that's what being a witness is all about. Be like Jesus. Who would like to pray for us? Eva wants to pray. Let's hear another prayer from them. Another thing for today, speaking for the children, Sarah, you know, everyone knows Sarah, Rasul or Sanders, right there, Sarah.
Yeah.
She's looking for children's books, other children to read that helps them to build their characters, and this also for parents to, build their time and help them be wiser, gain the character of a true Christian. So if you guys can donate your books or have any way to help, we'll be really happy. Talk to Sarah. Thank you guys so much.
Happy Sabbath. Oh, it's good to see people back. When I came back from leave a couple weeks ago, most of our employees from MEU were still gone on vacation, and the students were not here, and it was empty. It's nice to see people back. We know there's more people still coming, and we look forward to seeing that. Thank you, Franceli. That was wonderful. Shout to the Lord. Praise Him. May we always do that. Emil, you disappeared. Emil and Consuela, thank you. This morning, I wanted to share some ideas that I've titled Unintentional Witnessing. What does it mean to be a witness? In a legal perspective, what does it mean to be a witness? You see something, and you can say, I saw this. If Eileen tells me about something, am I a witness? No, that is hearsay from a legal perspective. Right? Jesus, one of the last things he said to his disciples, if you read in Acts chapter 1, verse 8, he says what? You will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in Samaria, Judea, and to the ends of the world. Is that task accomplished? Is that task accomplished? Are we there yet, Raja? I don't think so, are we? But are we always intentional about it? And, you know, here in the Middle East, we have many countries, and Pastor Amir during Sabbath school told us a story of a person who is from a country where we cannot send a pastor, we cannot send missionaries, but I am sure, given what I know, that we have some Adventists, and if not, it's Adventist World Radio or Al-Wad or some other way of reaching. And here we have many people who intentionally go to witness. That's great, that's very good, that's very necessary. But are we always intentional about it? And what happens when we're not intentional about it? Just, you know, I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but because we live outside of the United States, we have free access to the Adventist Review and all of its archives. I didn't know if you knew that. But if you go to the Adventist Review website, you can see everything. Just this month of August, we're still in August today, there was an interesting story there published about a young lady, age 20, engaged. She's moving, she's looking for a job. And as a medical assistant. And when she was asked, well, why did you come to Alabama? Why are you looking for this job? She said that, this is what she said to the interviewer. I feel certain that God has led me to Alabama. I want to live up to a standard of excellence for me as a Christian, and I intend to carry this into all my future endeavors. And she just said that because they were asking her about her personal life and why she moved and all this other stuff. A few months later, she gets asked by some friends, what are you doing to witness in the workplace? And she's thinking, well, it's a routine job. I'm a medical assistant. What am I supposed to be doing? And not very long after that, she discovers that she had been hired to assist a doctor who had a long history of, to put it nicely, irresponsible relationships with his assistants. And they wanted somebody who could stand up to him. And she had been hired because of her response and her attitude of faithfulness to God. And this is what this is what, at the time of employment, the person interviewing her told to the person that would sign off on her employment. This girl's fidelity to God is so strong, I know she will not waver. And the bottom line is, she got told, Abigail, you got this job because of your faith in God. Was it her intention to go out and be a witness? Was it her intention? No. But, yes, she was a witness. Now, we can think of other stories. Some of them not so positive, and we don't live too far from Judy, right? Where does that name come from? What's that? Jonah's Bay. Was Jonah a witness? Eileen rolls her eyes. We tell the story of Jonah, and yes, he went to Nineveh and he preached, and Nineveh repented, and that was great. But what happens in Jonah chapter 1? Turn in your Bibles to Jonah chapter 1. And I think it's an important, we know the story. He doesn't want to go to Nineveh, so he gets on a ship to go to Tarshish instead. And a big storm comes up, and they find him sleeping, right? And they cry out to the Lord, don't let us perish for this man's life. So verse 15, they picked Jonah and threw him into the sea. And the sea ceased from its raging. But then we often forget about verse 16. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice to the Lord and took vows. Just imagine, was Jonah trying to be a witness? He was escaping from God, right? But what kind of a witness is there about God? Because it's all about God. It's not about me. It's not about you. What witness is there about God when Jonah goes whoosh into the Mediterranean and suddenly it's calm? What do you think everybody else on that boat knew about God? God is the God Almighty, the God of creation, the God who stills the sea. It was not Jonah's intention to witness to those men and women, if there were women there, but he certainly did. So I'll tell you another story. We'll call the guy Joe. Poor Joe. His family is well off, but you know what happens with young people. They do things, and sometimes of their own will, and sometimes through circumstances, they wind up with the wrong people. And something that we hear about in the news, hopefully none of us have been victims of, young people get trafficked. They get sold, they get kidnapped, they get moved to another country. This happened to Joe. So he goes to a new country. It's a well-off country, so that's not too bad. He lands in a relatively wealthy house, which is not bad, and he's treated decently by his master. Now, Joe is a good believer. He does things well. He figures, what am I going to do? He's not at least horribly abused physically. And his master sees that he's capable. So he does things, and the master gives him more and more responsibility. And the master, the owner, he's a slave owner effectively, being the big powerful guy he is, doesn't spend a lot of time at home, and the wife takes an interest in Joe. But Joe is a believer. And when he does not reciprocate, he winds up in jail. You know the story. It's not Job, it's Joseph. We can turn to Genesis chapter 39. We've got the story of Joseph, who was trafficked by his brothers. I mean, he was kidnapped by his brothers, was he not? Sold into slavery. Goes to Potiphar's house. Now, let me ask you a question. Think about it honestly. If Potiphar had believed for 1 minute that Joseph had attempted to rape his wife, would he have landed in jail? Joseph would have been dead instantly. So it's obvious, as you read the story and you put it in the context, that Potiphar did not believe his wife, but he had to save face somehow. And so let's get Joseph out of the visible environment. Let's get him. Let's hide him so nobody sees him. The uncomfortable reality that my wife tried to have an affair with him is gone, and life goes on. Joseph is now in jail for something he didn't do in a country that is not his own, because his brothers, and this was not his enemies, these are, well, maybe they were his enemies, but it's his blood brothers, conspired against him. Yet, and we know the story, he reveals the meaning of the dreams to the cupbearer and to the bread maker. And it takes a couple of years, but Joseph is elevated to prime minister and saves the country of Egypt and his family. Have you read what Pharaoh says about Joseph's God? Pharaoh is amazed by God. Was it Joseph's purpose in going to Egypt to be a witness? First of all, he never purposed to go to Egypt. But was it his purpose to try to share the gospel with Potiphar and the king, with Pharaoh and all of the house? That was not his purpose. But what? As a true believer, he could not help himself but to live his life in such a way that it was a witness. And we could talk, we can talk about several other things. The Pharaoh says, "Can we find any one like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?" And what Pharaoh says to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you." What does that mean? Since God showed it to you, there's nobody that's more than you. Why? Because you're getting it from God. And your God obviously knows more than everybody else. Amazing. When we look at in Bible history, you have other people. You have the story of Daniel. Their choice of food. Was it their intention to be witnesses or their intention just to be faithful to God? They just wanted to be faithful to God. When his friends did not kneel at the statue, what was their purpose? It wasn't, "Come look at us," was it? Were they trying to be looked at? I think they would have much rather hidden and disappeared. But they knew what they needed to do, and so they did it. I'll tell you, I want to share with you 2 or 3 stories. There's one that Shauna tells from her days as a student missionary. She arrived, and due to a communication problem, when she arrived on the little island where she was served for the year, there was nobody at the airport to meet her. Have you ever experienced that? You arrive in a new country and there's nobody to meet you. What do? So it's a small place. She starts talking to people and she says, "I need to go to the Seventh-day Adventist school." And finally somebody says, Oh, 7 days. And that got her thinking. Are we Seventh-day Adventists? Or are we 7 days Adventists? You know, we're all here Sabbath morning, so okay, fine. What about tomorrow? What about Monday? What about Tuesday? Are we still showing God through us? I want to tell you a story from the country where I was born and raised, Argentina. It was just less than 20 years ago. We had a college and it was applying for university status. I know it here at MEU. Raja, you were involved in that process many years ago. About the same, well, maybe this was a little bit before that time. It might be closer to 30 years now. I'd have to look up the exact dates. And we had one individual who was tasked with the government relationships with the Ministry of Education. And he had to go back and forth to the capital city of Buenos Aires, doing all of the paperwork. And they were getting to the end, and they thought he was going and hoping this would be the last meeting to close the deal so that they would have the decree that would enable them to function as a university. And part of functioning as a university was enabling them to have a medical school, Viviana. Okay? And so he goes into Buenos Aires and he has a 9 o'clock meeting with the Director General of Higher Education. And so he walks into the office on schedule. He makes sure he's not late. And the Director General is there with his assistant. Please come, let's sit down. And they're talking for 30 minutes. And then the Director General rings a bell and an assistant comes in and says, "Can you please get us 2 cups of coffee?" And so the assistant goes, comes back 5 minutes later on a nicely served tray with 3 cups of coffee. And what do you do when you're serving? You start with a guest, right? Now, I don't know how it is, maybe where you're from, but at least in Argentina, Dennis, does a good Adventist drink coffee? Not really, certainly not back then, right? That is not the normal thing to do. Dennis knows, he's smiling. And they've had this whole discussion about the Adventist principles of health and why I'm an Adventist medical school and everything else. And the first thing that this person comes, the assistant comes, is extends the tray to Professor Juan Carlos Olmedo. Deceased now, I believe. And he quickly elevates a word of prayer. He says, "God, is this one of those times that I just do? What do I do?" At which point the Director General speaks up and says, "Excuse me, assistant. I told you 2 cups of coffee. This man is a Seventh-day Adventist. He does not drink coffee. If you want, please get him a glass of water." And he was trembling because he had come very close to taking that cup of coffee. What kind of witness are you when you do something that goes contrary to what people understand? He was not intending to be a witness, but he was. Let me tell you another story that happened many years earlier. But it started many years earlier, but it ended more recently in the country of Chile, which for those who know my family, you know my father was born and raised there. We have the Chile Adventist University, which has a tradition of every year with their theology students doing an evangelistic series in one of the neighboring towns. And they have a problem because they've been there for many years. And so, the near towns all have Adventist churches now. And their objective is to go to an unentered area. And so during the summer, they do canvassing in the area, and they do other things. So it's all they do a year-long preparation before the series. And so one year, now they're having to go more than 100 kilometers away from campus because everything that's close by has an Adventist community. So they went to a community that had been problematic, where in the past Adventist call porters had gotten beaten up, and so it wasn't really, it was one of those places that people were saying, really, do we want to go there again? And they said, okay, yeah, let's go. So they sent a canvassing team. Where's the canvassers? A few of you here, okay? They sent the canvassing team, and what they did is they said, before we send the whole team, we're going to just send 2 guys. Let's make sure that they don't get into too much trouble. If it goes well for them for a few days, then we'll send the rest of the team. So the 2 guys get there, and the first morning they go out canvassing. Knock on door number 1, they do their canvass, door number 2, and as they're coming out of the second or the third door, somebody stops them on the sidewalk and says, "Are you the guys selling books?" What do you say?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, they have their briefcases full of books. What can they say? So the guys say, "Please come with us." And they're like, "Really? 3 doors and we're done?" So they didn't figure they had a choice. They walked 2 or 3 blocks. They were taken not to an office, but to a home. And they were a little bit puzzled by that. Chile at least has the rule of law, so they didn't feel that they were going to be tortured or something inside the house. So they walk in, and as they walk in with the man of the house, and he tells his wife, "I found them." And a couple moments later, she comes out with pastries and juice, saying, "Please, serve yourselves." And they're like, "Sure. And, what's up?" And the guy says, "I have a question for you. Can you show me the books that you're selling?" So they start canvassing him. And at one point they pull out a Desire of Ages. And the guy says, "Do you believe everything that is in these books?" These are theology majors. What are you going to say? Sure, we believe it. At that point, the man hands them a Desire of Ages, early 1950s edition. And he tells them a story. He says, back in the early 50s, we got this book. We read it. We wrote to the publishing house, but we've never received a response. Publishing house in Buenos Aires. But we've shared this book in the community. We believe what is in this book. We have a community of believers. Can you help us? And of course they were happy. But then their question was, so how did you get the book? And this is a story that they were told. They said, look, it was summertime, it was harvest time. And as was the custom in Chile at that point, not every farmer had their own threshing devices. And so every summer at threshing time, harvest time, people would come through with threshing machines to do the threshing quickly for them. And he said there were these 2 young guys that came through one summer with a threshing machine. And on Friday they told us to not come on Saturday. But we still came on Saturday. And they would not do the threshing on Saturday. And they were just sitting in the shade reading. So we sat and talked to them and said, what are you reading? And we had some conversations. And they explained a few things to us. And we said, well, can we have something? And so they gave us this book. Because we had Bibles. And we've then studied them. We don't know who they are. They left. So instead of starting an evangelistic series in that town, they admitted 70 members by profession of faith and changed the name of the worship hall that they were using to say Seventh-day Adventist Church. Do you think those young men were intending to evangelize? I actually know they were not. Because when I heard the story in Argentina, Shauna, we heard it shortly after we arrived in '98 in Argentina. We said, who could that have been? So I went to my father, my source for all things Chilean, and I said, Father, this is the story. And he says, I remember that summer. I did not intend to do any witnessing. We were just trying to be faithful, trying to stay out of the heat in the shade of the threshing machine, which is the only shade we had. And they wanted something. We said, you know, if we give them a book, what harm is it going to do? He and his brother, paying their school fees by doing threshing with our father's threshing machine. Was not intentional. It was purely a matter of being faithful in how you live your life. In everything. In everything that we do. You know, many times we talk of how we eat, how we drink, and we quote 1 Corinthians 10:31, whatever you eat or drink, do it to the glory of God. Sometimes I think we need to remember Solomon. Solomon, in Ecclesiastes, we often use Solomon to prove the state of the dead. We use Ecclesiastes 9:10. But we focus on the second half of the verse. The first half says, whatever comes to your hand to do, do it with all your might. Or some people say, and I'm not the Hebrew scholar, some people say that it would be better translated, do it to the maximum of the strength that you have. In other words, don't kill yourself, but put it all in it. What kind of witness are we giving? Even when we're not giving a Bible study, even when we're not preaching. And I would ask a question. Would there be enough evidence to convict you of being a Christian based on how you live? Is my witness, is your witness what God expects of us? And I pray that God would help each one of us in our daily living, not just in our sabbatical living, but in our daily living, to demonstrate Christianity not only in words, but also in actions. And I've been thrilled with the Sabbath school lessons this quarter that lead us in that direction. So as we close this morning, I would invite you to stand and sing hymn number 316, Live Out Thy Life Within. Father, please live in us. May we be your witnesses today, tomorrow, and always. Because, Lord, we want you to come soon. And we know that if each of us does our part, that will truly happen and we can go spend our Sabbaths with you. Thank you for your promises, and thank you for being with us today and always. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.